Jason Abraham, the Shadow Teacher, talking to you on this beautiful, pure morning. And the topic of cults has been popping up in my field of awareness recently. So that's what this video is going to be about. I'm going to share with you what I know based off of extensive research, as well as my own experience from situations where people I know have been in cults and have attempted to bring me in to certain cults. And I'm going to tie it all up talking about the biggest cult that most people are drinking the Kool-Aid from, but they don't even realize they're in it. And that is the cult of the Matrix. So first of all, let's look at what a cult is and why people get involved. So the cult is essentially a group where the members within the group surrender any sorts of personal identity to the external identity and ethos of that group. And no one will ever say they're in a cult. You'll know, even if you know someone who's in a cult, they're never going to say, "Hey, I'm a cult member. You want to join my cult?" And that is because when people get involved in a cult, they are not doing it for any reason other than usually personal development and finding a place of belonging, which are admirable qualities and just normal human traits of a healthy human psyche. We all want to get better, we all want to improve, and we all want a place of belonging. So many times cults can be attractive to people who are driven, successful, and motivated, who simply want to level up. And then the other end of the spectrum, you have the cults that are more obvious, where they are attracting people who feel like they don't fit in, who are misfits from the conventional society that they live in, and are just seeking that place of belonging. But both dynamics, both situations, people who join are seeking to improve themselves and are seeking that place of belonging. So when one gets into a cult, the initiation is not going to seem like anything that's too far out of the ordinary. It's very subtle. It's kind of baiting these drives and desires that you naturally have with enticing carrots and gold of pieces of wisdom that are often useful and valid. You find this a lot with the self-help cults. And so what the cult is offering, again, is something that makes sense. It's something that a sane person would see as appealing. But what they do, as you get more and more enmeshed in the cult, more and more is required of you. So the sacrifice and what you were required to give and put in increases. And eventually the process moves to where the thinking and the truth that you once knew, you start to relinquish that, and you take on the values that the cult puts inside of you. And eventually, as you level up even more and you get deeper and deeper and deeper and you get more isolated into a cult, the consciousness shifting devices that are used become even more extreme. If you look at the People's Church, Jim Jones, he used a technique called the White Knight, where he would deprive people of sleep and then would broadcast on a loudspeaker these messages in the middle of the night. And if you were in Jonestown, if you went that far, you were required to participate. And that's the other thing, is like as you get deeper and deeper into the cult, there are greater consequences for not adhering to what is asked of you. The punishments are more extreme. And when you've identified at that level, it is incredibly painful. It's essentially like a death to be excommunicated, to lose your identity there. So that's why you will see people doing these things that may seem or sound like they're insane on the outside once they have gotten that deep into the cult. Now, some believe many ideas from a cult that I've talked about with indoctrination and then shifting states of consciousness. There's some beliefs that that cults are actually started by intelligence agencies that are experimenting with mind control tactics. Because if you want to shift the consciousness of a society, you want to have a beta test. So what a great way to do that. Kind of know what you're selling, know the people you're going to attract, and then you play with some of these measures to trigger the response that you want. I can't, again, I'm just speaking from sources that I would find credible that have spoken of this. I'm not, but it's still just an idea. Didn't come from me. So now let's look, as I hinted at, the ultimate cult, the Matrix. And before I say that, one of the final stages of someone who is deeply ingrained and deeply indoctrinated into a cult is they break away from family and friends, and then they fully just take what the cult feeds them, and they look at their family and friends, people who have known them, who have loved them, who they have known and loved all their lives, as enemies. This can potentially happen. And so now let's look at the Matrix, the modern world. Do we have some of these elements of indoctrination in the Matrix? If you go to school, if you go and you stay in public education and then go on to a college and earn a degree, you may even have a scholarship, are more and more sacrifices asked of you? Are certain protocols asked of you to shape your beliefs that exclude other possibilities? Is this not similar to what happens in a cult? And this has changed over my years. I have a college education, but I see a big difference in the level of indoctrination and programming that's happening today as opposed to when I was in school good while back. But it was still there when I was in school. I just happened to see it and wake up. So we have indoctrination on all levels ever since we step into the Matrix. But the cults, you have a supreme authority figure who's basically the voice of God. I would argue that in the modern world, the ethos of scientism is the voice of God, and that's the voice of God that the Matrix echoes and heeds to. Not true science, because science is the pursuit of truth and understanding, but scientism, which is a reductionist ideology that breaks everything down and looks at individual components in complete isolation with exclusion to other relevant information, and then deduces their theories and beliefs from there. And what we see in the modern world is a situation where we're getting information with people who have degrees and fancy titles that cost a lot of money to achieve. And we are told to believe these people, and the information they give us is based off of their authority. But again, it's excluding other possibilities by other people who've put equally valid amounts of time and have put the work into understanding what they're doing. and people just accept it as true. And I see in this modern world, again, I'm seeing families, people turning on each other, this sense of paranoia, and people who are behaving in a very strange and insane way, people who I would see as intelligent, but their behavior, I would say, is insane. And it all stems from the belief that the cult that they worship and don't know that they worship is telling them to believe something in a certain way. So I've obviously made a point to stop drinking the Kool-Aid of the Matrix. That's a reference actually to Jim Jones, who used Flavor Aid in Jonestown when the story is that the government was going to come and shut it down. And he said, it was like, it's better for us to maintain our integrity, maintain our family. So they drank poisoned Flavor Aid, which I believe was like a Kmart version of Kool-Aid, and committed suicide. And I see the equivalent of many people doing the same thing. They're putting something on their face that restricts them from accessing life force. They are afraid of human connection, which enhances life force. And they're just listening to the gods of scientism, gods of politics, and then the lesser gods, which are the celebrities that are telling them to do it all. So when you wake up and you get out, if you decide to do that, when you start to see these inconsistencies, it can be lonely and it can be scary because a piece of you essentially has to die. Something you may have valued and identified and looked at as safety in your spirit, you now see as an illusion, and it's a sort of death when you step out, when you separate yourself from it, because a big piece of you dies and goes with that. But when you know that you are simply eternal consciousness, going through an experience in the 3D realm and matter, then you know that your real self is not going to die, but lives eternally. And when you see that you've embraced falsehood, you are walking the hero's journey then. You are honoring your soul contract because you're choosing the uncomfortable process of embracing truth and rejecting something that has a malevolent intention of corruption and control. And that's something I missed. Man, the most important thing about cults are all ultimately about control. They are about you surrendering your control and giving up that control to this external authority figure, this external demigod. And many people, again, when they get here, they get trapped in circular thinking. They get trapped in this irrational thinking that is all based off of cult logic. And if you know someone and you're pulling them out and you love them and they're in a cult, say you've stepped out, but you want to pull them out too, it can be very painful because you can show them the truth and they'll reject it. They'll even fight you. Just like the movie, the Roddy Piper movie, They Live, when he's putting on a certain device that I have a reference to. He's trying to share that device with his friend so he can see the world as it is. And they literally get into a fight. You have to fight people kicking and screaming sometimes to show them the truth. And I'll leave you at that. If you know someone who's trapped in the matrix, who's trapped in a cult, don't give up on them. But just know it's going to be hard work to pull them out. Study, read, know yourself, connect with the spirit of love that's in you, because ultimately love is what will guide us all to the truth, and that's what you have to go by if you're there, if you're trying to support someone and help them find their way. We all got to make our own decisions though, so just know that you can't control someone else. You always have to let people make their choice, but don't give up on them. When someone you truly love, just work on that spiritual path for you, and I hope it works out if you're in that situation. That's all I got. Class dismissed. Jason Abraham, the Shadow Teacher, wishing you peace.